Hi, today I'm in a call with Keith Reed, one of our keynote speakers at the Bleed Compliance and Ethics Conference taking place on October 9th to 10th. 2025. So Keith Reed is a former group compliance and ethics director at British Telecom, and he's also a published author. You wrote a book, The Unconventional Compliance Officer, which we are also going to talk about in this interview. So let me first introduce Keith properly. Keith came into the compliance position at British Telecom actually from first being a general manager, supply chain integrity for British Telecom with £6 billion worth of the supply chain. And then you actually stepped into the group director of compliance and ethics position with the responsibility for compliance, ethics, and regulatory risk management. You were covering 150,000 employees and contractors operating in around 176 countries. So Keith is also past winner of the Compliance Register's Best Compliance Officer Award. After you left British Telecom, you worked with a range of other major household brands, and you worked with lead solution providers such as Global Advice Network, now Gen Integrity with Learn, and you covered about your experience from your compliance, in-house compliance practice, your practical approaches and tools that turn out really well for you, which you will explain to us in the book, The Unconventional Compliance Officer. So you're talking about unconventional tools and techniques as well, so we are very interested. But first, Keith, so welcome first of all,
Thank
and
you.
yeah, and tell us also something about yourself that's not part of your official bio.
Oh, that's a tough one. I've struggled with this thinking about anything like I always do. Um, I I guess two things I would say is one, I came to compliance only almost by accident. As you say, I was the general manager, supply chain integrity. What I hadn't realised is the company had some real problems, serious problems regarding
Yeah.
compliance performance. I suddenly got a call one Thursday night to say, would I be interested? I think by Monday, I'd had a meeting with the CEO, and by Tuesday, I was suddenly the compliance director. What I also hadn't realised was that
Surprise!
exactly in the press, I can remember these words. Then 2 days later, I think in the press, there's a big article about the compliance failures, and it said our regulator was watching the company like a hawk, misusing confidential information. And then three
Lucky
weeks
you.
later, yeah, exactly. 3 weeks later, there was another one, another lot of words about how we were under siege from the regulator. But 18 months later, I'd managed to turn that around. The regulator was really positive about us and so on. So I think, as we get on to some further questions in a moment, I think I think people listening in will certainly learn something from my experiences anyway, put it that way.
Wow. Wow, amazing. So probably you are a person to go to regarding flipping around the entire culture, because probably, and as I also remember from your book that you kindly sent to me, that there was quite a shift. So I want to touch on that a little bit, at least from your
Sure.
in-house experience. What has been the greatest milestones in your compliance and ethics officer's journey at British Telecom? What would you say?
I think the first thing was realizing the size of the challenge. I mean, I laughed about it a moment ago, but literally, it was one evening I suddenly am the compliance director. You know, I've got a small team, and obviously they read the press the same as I do. So there was a lot of negative press and so on. And I wasn't going to allow that, simply wasn't going to have that. So um, you have to inject energy and urgency. Um, and I think you have to be dogged and determined, and that's me in a nutshell. So I don't usually let much get away from me and so on. So and we stuck with it. And as I say, at every turn, I have 1,000 ideas a day, 999 of which are absolutely useless. But there's one in there that's a gem, and we use some of those ideas and others, not all mine, but others and so on, and really turned it around quickly. So I think, and that's some of the things that hopefully I'll get to talk about later on.
Yeah, yeah, sure. So this was all the material for your book, basically, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and
So, so maybe you can share what is from the Unconventional Compliance Officer book. What would you say would be like the key takeaways from it
the book's got
regarding your intake, regarding the so far response to your book?
well, there's some number of questions there. Interesting. I mean, the response has been really good. I've never written a book before. I had no idea about publishing a book,
It's
no
very
idea
good though.
whatsoever.
It's very good though.
Well, thank you for that. I had no idea, and but I get photos literally every day. The other day, I got a photo from somebody who was on a plane flying across the Atlantic, and the book is propped up
Amazing.
on their tray, and they're reading. That's their transatlantic reading. So um, bear in mind, I was a guy who was not very good at English and so on. I'm still surprised, um, but yeah, I think first of all there are 21 chapters in the book, and I'd like to think that those 21 chapters, people who read it, everyone will bring something new to what they're trying to do.
Hmm.
And so for example, one of the main examples is about every compliance officer in the world spends their time pushing. You push out training, you push out reminders, you push out
Hmm.
communications, and so on. The list goes on. What does that lead to? It leads to compliance fatigue and pushback. So I talk a lot in the book about how you can change that seesaw from from push to pull. Fundamental shift, but very effective shift. Um, so that's one example. I think I talk a lot about whistleblowing. Um, you'll see in the book one of the things that I did was to do with branding our hotline. And I mean, everybody calls it their speak up line or their whistleblower hotline and so on. Just that title puts people off. Just that title makes people think twice. So I wanted to change that again,
Hmm.
change that, change that uncertainty. Fear of the unknown is one of the biggest reasons why people don't
Hmm.
call the hotline.
Hmm.
The
Hmm.
biggest reason of all though is fear of retaliation.
Hmm.
And again, I talk a lot about
Hmm.
how you can change the environment
Hmm.
regarding retaliation
Hmm.
because everybody probably listening to this
Hmm.
has an anti-retaliation policy, but that's with respect, that's not good enough.
Hmm.
That's a passive policy. What I talk about is how you go for active anti-retaliation.
Uh-huh.
Um,
Uh-huh.
and I think the one question I pose, and I will pose, is how far would you go to achieve a compliant organisation? Because that was the question I posed myself on day one in the job. And what I'll come up with is 3 or 4 examples that show how far would you go. Because the problem for compliance officers is quite simple. You only have a limited range of tools, or so you think. You only have policies, you only have processes, you only have training, you only have communications. And what this is about is saying, yeah, you've got all those, but why don't you do something different with them? And that's really the book in a nutshell. But 21 chapters are like that.
Uh-huh. So let's not forget the compliance shield. Because that's going to be, and we are now, we came to the question, what the audience of Bleed Compliance and Ethics Conference have to look forward to, right? Because we are going to focus with the very concrete exercise with you called the Compliance Shield. Can you just walk us through a little bit what is this? What do the audience have to look forward to?
Okay, it's a very good question because it started because one day I got worked up with my colleagues, with my team, and said, "What keeps us? Yeah, what keeps us out of the courts? What keeps us away from fines? What keeps us out of the press?" Bear in mind, when I'd started the job, we were in the press almost daily.
Yeah.
Questions were being asked in our parliament, and so on and so forth. So, and in my mind, I sketched out um, uh, the company at the centre and what was the protection around it. And that ultimately developed into an exercise where you can work through it very quickly. Um, you can identify what your shield is made up of, and you can identify how good those elements are, and so on. And I've used this literally around the world, and at the end, um, people are always surprised um, and shocked, very shocked sometimes. But it also means it's something you can do quickly. You can take it away, do it back at the office, but it also quickly identifies what your opportunities and challenges
Hmm.
are.
Okay.
Um,
So,
that's
so
it.
what would you say is the main benefit of this compliance shield? So people will come to the conference, they will come to your session, and we will do the exercise. We will make the large printouts where people will basically design their own compliance shield. So what will be the greatest benefits from so far experiences of
So
this
they
exercise?
will be able to take away from doing that quick piece of work where their gaps are in their shield, what exposes them
Mhm.
to risk, and they'll also from that, and I don't want to say too much, but it will also identify what the opportunities are, to address those risks and how they can do it better. I'm
Okay.
going to say no more, but that's
All
in summary
right.
what they do. So it's a win-win. Not only do you know what you need to
Yeah.
address, you get an indication of what you need to do to
Yeah.
address them.
Yeah, cool. I'm looking forward to it. So please, for the listeners or the viewers, can you please tell us where can people find you? Where can they get your book? I know you have it. Can you just show it so we
I
all
think so.
see
Yeah, it's here. This
see
is
the
this
famous
is
book?
this is the book. This is it. Can you see that? The
Yeah,
unconventional
yeah, yeah,
fight,
yeah.
and it says
It's
Keith Reed, I think,
visible
at the
well.
bottom. Yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Um.
Like it
Okay,
should.
that's an interesting question. So I've
You're on
been
you're on LinkedIn, right?
yes, I'm on LinkedIn, definitely. Definitely on LinkedIn. You'll find me easily there. Um, and interesting question though, because since leaving BT 15 years ago, I've advised, as you've said, a number of organisations, worked with a number of providers, and so on. But in that time, I've never, ever had a website. And the reason being that 15 years of solid
But you
work
have
as
email. But you have email.
absolutely. Always, it's all been done on word of mouth recommendation. So
Good.
that's why I've never needed a website. I've never had a website. So something which makes me smile sometimes. But yes, I'm on email. You can, anybody wants the email, you'll find it. You'll find
We'll
that
share
on
it.
LinkedIn.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
absolutely.
Good. Great chatting with you. And I'm really looking forward to the conference. I'm really looking forward to your session. And I'm happy that together we will create an experience for the participants as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yay. Looking forward.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.